The stalemate he has created with the federal government, which is generally recognized as having final authority over the nation's borders, catapults the issue from a humanitarian crisis to a constitutional crisis, potentially teeing up yet another controversial issue for the Supreme Court ahead of the 2024 presidential election, which Republicans are keen on making a referendum on border security. The Biden administration, bolstered by a ruling from the High Court earlier this week, contests that it has the ultimate authority over what strategies can and cannot be employed to stem the flow of migrants. But in a novel, and far from universally accepted interpretation of the Constitution, Abbott is seeking for Texas the right to act on its own. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states, Abbott charged in a statement issued on Wednesday, citing Article 4 of the Constitution, which guarantees to states that the federal government shall protect each of them against invasion. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them, Abbott said. He went on to accuse Biden of being a lawless president who does nothing to stop external threats like cartels smuggling millions of illegal immigrants across the border. The failure of the Biden administration to protect the border, Abbott argued, triggers Article 1 of the Constitution, which is where things get legally tricky. A section of that article prohibits states in most cases from entering independent compacts with foreign governments or waging wars. But it adds the key qualifier that the prohibitions apply to the states unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. But with Republicans of late employing the term invasion to characterize the movement of immigrants and goods into the country, Abbott appears to be forcing a confrontation with the White House and the federal government. For these reasons I have already declared an invasion, he wrote, to invoke Texas's constitutional authority to defend and protect itself. That authority is the supreme law of the land and supersedes any federal statutes to the contrary. Many constitutional scholars say Abbott's legal footing is shaky. The argument that Abbott is seeking to make, that immigration across the border constitutes an act of invasion, is a very broad interpretation of the word invasion, says Bertrand Ross, law professor at the University of Virginia and director of the Karsh Center for Law and Democracy. It's more in line with the rhetoric of our politics than with what the founders had in mind. In fact, he notes, James Madison dedicated part of his Report of 1800 to specifically note that illegal immigration is not a form of invasion. I don't know how serious Texas is about litigating this, he says. The legal claims seem extraordinarily weak. I don't see it having any legs in court. Abbott's actions came in the wake of a 5-4 Supreme Court decision to vacate a preliminary injunction previously granted by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which had barred U.S. Border Patrol agents from removing razor wire that the Texas National Guard had placed along the border. While the High Court's order does not bar Texas troops from continuing to erect razor wire, it allows Border Patrol agents to remove it. The stakes were raised Thursday when Trump, the de facto leader of his party, issued a late-night statement backing Abbott's characterization of the situation at the border as a national security, public safety, and public health catastrophe, and calling on states to mobilize and deploy their National Guard troops to secure the border in Texas. Texas has rightly invoked the invasion clause of the Constitution, and must be given full support to repel the invasion, Trump said. We encourage all willing states to deploy their guards to Texas to prevent the entry of illegals and to remove them back across the border. The charge comes at a precarious moment for U.S. politics, in which the former president, who continues repeating unfounded claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him, has amassed an ardent army of far-right supporters and has all but formally captured the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, has been increasingly calling the shots for state and federal lawmakers, despite not holding office himself. Earlier this week, Trump virtually sank a long-sought, delicately negotiated immigration reform package that Republicans have been chomping at the bit to pass. One that would have enacted the most significant border protections in decades. And it certainly wouldn't be the first time states have lent a hand to Abbott to help border security efforts. Last year, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis sent more than 1,100 of his National Guard troops and law enforcement officers to Texas to assist with border security between the U.S. and Mexico, along with 5 planes, 17 drones, and a fleet of 10 boats. If the Constitution really made states powerless to defend themselves against an invasion, it wouldn't have been ratified in the first place, and Texas would have never joined the Union when it did, DeSantis said in a statement, adding that he would continue to assist Abbott with personnel and assets. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem and Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt also sent National Guard troops to the border last year, about 50 of them each, to, at least symbolically, bolster Abbott's efforts. "Is exactly right to invoke Texas's constitutional authority to defend itself," she said in a statement. "The Biden administration has created a national security crisis and put Americans in danger. Their failure is an unconstitutional dereliction of duty." Messages of solidarity poured in from Republican-led states across the country, including Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Idaho, Iowa, Louisiana, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Utah, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson said in a statement that the House will do everything in its power to support Abbott, and that the first thing on its to-do list is to hold Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas accountable. On Friday, he issued a Dear Colleague letter in which he announced that the House would move forward with articles of impeachment against Mayorkas. Governor Abbott is not interested in that. He wants to politicize an issue, and he's not helping communities. He actually isn't. And he's actually putting Border Patrol agents in harm's way by doing what he's doing. When asked whether Biden is considering federalizing the Texas National Guard as a way to prevent Abbott from dispatching them to the border, as some Democrats have urged him to do in order to blunt Abbott's move, Jean-Pierre said she would not speak to any actions Biden may or may not take. Governor Greg Abbott is using the Texas National Guard to obstruct and create chaos at the border, Representative Joaquin Castro, Texas Democrat, said in a statement. If Abbott is defying yesterday's Supreme Court ruling, needs to establish sole federal control of the Texas National Guard now.